Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Psych Talk. Today I will talk about operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a way of learning where behaviors are shaped by rewards or punishments. So basically, reinforcement always increases the likelihood of a behavior happening again under similar circumstances. We have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So in both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, we're trying to increase the likelihood of a behavior. And basically in positive reinforcement, you're adding something good, you're adding a reward. Whereas in negative reinforcement, you take away something unpleasant to encourage a behavior. For example, something very simple for positive reinforcement. You give a dog a treat for sitting down, and that will create, that will make the dog obviously sit down every time you tell him to sit down because you give him a treat. So the treat is the reinforcement. For negative reinforcement is, for example, when you're in the car and you're not wearing a seatbelt. And so the car starts beeping to tell you to wear the seatbelts. And so what do? You wear the seatbelts so that the sound goes away. So the behavior increases, like your behavior of putting the seatbelt on increases because you just want to get rid of the sound that the car is doing to make you wear the seatbelt. Another example for positive reinforcement, let's say a professor gives a student a praise or an extra credit for completing their assignment on time. And what that will do is that it motivates the student to keep completing the assignments on time. And whereas negative reinforcement, another example will be, for example, you always cleaning the room or keeping your room clean because you don't want to hear your mother complaining about it. So the relief from not hearing your mother complain and bitch about it encourages you to clean your room, and yeah, it just increases the likelihood of that behavior happening again. So that was reinforcement, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, and both of them increase the likelihood of a behavior happening again in the future under similar circumstances. Whereas punishment, we also have positive and negative punishment, but what punishment does is it decreases the likelihood of a behavior happening again in the future. And I just want to make sure you guys understand the difference between reinforcement and punishment. So for reinforcement, we increase the likelihood of a behavior. With punishment, we decrease the likelihood of a behavior. And for positive reinforcement, you're adding something. So you're adding the treat, you're giving the treat to the dog after sitting down. You're giving that extra credit to the student after he or she does the assignment. For negative reinforcement, we're removing something, right? Like, we're turning off like the alarm in the morning because we don't want to hear the loud sound. The same thing with the seatbelt. We are putting the seatbelt on, so we're increasing the likelihood of that behavior by removing something. Whereas positive punishment is the same thing. We're adding something, and for negative punishment, we're removing something. So, for example, for positive punishment, we're adding an unpleasant stimulus after a behavior. So, for example, a child gets scolded for misbehaving. So you're adding the getting scolded for the misbehaving, so the child is less likely to misbehave in the future because he doesn't want to get scolded. Whereas for negative punishment, we are removing a pleasant stimulus after a behavior. So, for example, taking a toy away from a child when he or she misbehaves. Another example for positive punishment could be, for example, a child misbehaves in class and the teacher gives him or her extra homework to do. So you're adding something, right? An unpleasant stimulus so that the child stops misbehaving in class because he or she doesn't want to have that extra homework to do. Whereas for another example for negative punishment could be, let's say you stay out late and your parents take away your weekend privileges. For example, you cannot go out with your friends or use your phone. So you're taking away something. And that was all for today. So we talked about operant conditioning. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of a behavior happening again in the future under similar circumstances. We have positive reinforcement, we're adding something. Negative reinforcement, we're removing something. Then we talked about punishment, which decreases the likelihood of a behavior. Positive punishment, we're adding something. Negative punishment, we are removing something.